She wasn't born into honor. She didn't come from a priestly line, a noble family, or a tribe of the chosen. Just a Canaanite woman, a resident of Jericho, one of the most fortified cities in the ancient world, living in a land destined for judgment, working a life that the world called shameful. Yet, she was chosen, not by bloodline, not by reputation. She was chosen by faith, the kind of faith that moves in the dark before the miracle arrives. But while walls stood tall and armies gathered at the Jordan, a quiet decision was brewing, one that wouldn't be fought with weapons or strategy, but with a scarlet cord, a hidden roof, and the courage to believe in a God she barely knew. Her name was Rahab, and this isn't just the story of a woman who survived. It's the story of how God's grace reached across enemy lines to save the most unlikely of souls, and through her, to change the course of history forever. After 40 years in the wilderness, the children of Israel stood on the edge of the Promised Land. For 4 decades, an entire generation had wandered through the desert. They had watched their parents die in the wilderness, as God had declared because of their unbelief at Kadesh Barnea. They had grown up hearing the stories of Egypt, of the plagues that brought the mightiest empire on earth to its knees, of the night the death angel passed over every home marked with blood, of the morning they walked out of slavery and never looked back. God had already parted the Red Sea. He had fed them manna from heaven and drawn water from a rock. He had led them by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. He had been faithful every single step, and now the time had come to cross over and take what he had promised. Their leader, Joshua, the son of Nun, was a soldier shaped by decades of waiting. He had stood beside Moses on the mountain. He had carried the minority report from Canaan when the other spies trembled in fear. When 10 men saw giants and saw only defeat, Joshua and Caleb had said, "We can do this. God is with us." He had been faithful then. And now, God had spoken clearly to him once more. "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Joshua understood the weight of the moment. An entire nation was watching him, and the first city that stood in their way was Jericho. Jericho was no ordinary city. It was a city of thick walls and iron gates, a stronghold the Canaanites believed was unconquerable. Its walls were so wide that houses were built directly into them. It sat at the gateway to the entire land of Canaan. To take the land, they had to take Jericho first, and Jericho had every reason to feel secure. But its people had heard the stories of Israel. They had heard about Egypt, about the plagues, about the sea that split open and swallowed Pharaoh's entire army. Word had traveled across the desert and the river, and they were terrified. Their hearts had melted, their courage had failed, but their gates remained shut, their walls remained standing, and their defiance remained firm. Because fear without surrender is just a city holding its breath. Joshua made his move. He selected 2 men, quiet and skilled, and sent them ahead as spies. "Go," he told them. "Explore the land, especially Jericho." He needed to know what they were walking into. He needed intelligence. He needed eyes on the ground. They crossed the Jordan and slipped into the city undetected, but they needed shelter. A place to stay without drawing attention, somewhere they could observe without being observed. And somehow, by the unseen hand of God, they ended up at the house of a woman named Rahab. Rahab's house was built into the city wall itself, a strategic location on the edge of everything, where the city met the outside world. She was a woman the world had written off, a woman with a complicated past and a name that came with judgment attached to it. But she had eyes that saw what others refused to see, and a heart that had already been quietly turning toward the God of Israel, listening to every story that had drifted across the desert winds. She welcomed the spies in without hesitation. She hid them under the stalks of flax she had laid out to dry on her roof. burying them beneath the ordinary rhythms of her daily work. She made a choice in that moment that would cost her everything if it went wrong, and she made it without being asked twice. But someone had seen, perhaps a neighbor, perhaps a soldier posted at the gate. Word reached the king of Jericho swiftly. Israelite spies had entered the city, and they had gone to the house of Rahab. The king wasted no time. His messengers were sent immediately with a direct royal command. "Bring out the men who came to you. They have come to spy out the whole land." Rahab stood at her door and looked the king's men in the eye. Her voice was calm, her expression steady. "Yes," she said, "the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them." The men believed her. They turned and rushed toward the Jordan River crossings, convinced they would find the spies camped somewhere along the route. As soon as they were gone, the city gates were shut and bolted behind them. The city locked itself in. The king's men chased shadows into the dark. And on the roof, hidden beneath bundles of flax, the two spies waited. When the city had grown quiet and the danger had passed, Rahab climbed to the roof. She sat beside these two men she had just risked her life for, men who were strangers, men who were enemies by every measure of politics and culture and history, and she spoke to them, not with fear, not with bargaining, but with a trembling, hard-won, unshakable faith. "I know," she said, "that the Lord has given you this land. Not, I think. Not, I have heard a rumor. Not, perhaps your God is powerful." She said, "I know. We have heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt. We have heard what you did to the two kings of the Amorites on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you completely destroyed." When we heard these things, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. She had been carrying these stories for years, turning them over in the quiet of her mind, measuring them against the gods of Canaan, the silent idols that demanded ritual and returned nothing. And she had come to a conclusion that most of her city refused to make, not a conclusion forced on her, not a faith inherited from her parents. A faith she had chosen, slowly, in the dark, long before the spies ever knocked on her door. "For the Lord your God," she said, "He is God in heaven above and on the earth below." It was a confession of faith, and it came from the lips of a Canaanite woman in a condemned city before the walls ever fell. She continued, "Now then, I beg you, swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will deliver us from death." She was not asking for herself alone. Every person she loved was on her heart. She had made a decision that put her life in danger, and she wanted her family covered by the same grace that she was reaching toward. The spies listened carefully. They understood what was being asked, and they understood what had just happened. This woman had saved them. She had lied to the king for them. She had hidden them under her own roof while soldiers searched the city. And she had done it because she believed in a God she had never been formally introduced to. "Our lives for your lives," they said. "If you do not tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land." A covenant was made, not in a palace, not between generals or kings or priests, between two Israelite spies and a Canaanite woman, in the quiet of the night, on a rooftop, with a condemned city sleeping beneath them. Rahab lowered them down through the window with a rope, her house built into the city wall, making it possible to descend directly outside Jericho's defenses. Before they parted, she gave them practical wisdom. "Go toward the hills so the pursuers won't find you. Hide there for 3 days until they return to the city. Then go on your way." And they gave her a sign, a single instruction that would determine who lived and who did not. "Tie this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down. Bring your father and mother, your brothers, and all your family into your house. If anyone goes outside your house into the street, their blood will be on their own head, and we will be innocent. But anyone who is inside your house with you, we will be responsible for their safety." Rahab agreed, and as soon as the men were gone, she tied the scarlet cord in the window, a small thread of red hanging in the dark, visible from the outside, over the city wall. It was not a military fortification. It was not a sword or a shield or a treaty signed by kings. It was a cord, ordinary rope, stained scarlet. But it meant everything, because the promise of God was attached to it. Rahab then went to work. She went to her family, her father, her mother, her brothers and sisters. She told them what she had done and what she had been promised. She brought them into her home, into the space beneath the scarlet promise, and they stayed. The spies returned to Joshua and made their report. "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us." Joshua rose early the next morning and moved the entire nation toward the Jordan. The river was at flood stage, overflowing its banks as it did every harvest season. There was no natural way across. But when the feet of the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant touched the water's edge, the river stopped. The waters piled up far upstream, and the people crossed on dry ground. Every man, every woman, every child, from one bank to the other, walking through the middle of a stopped river. The news reached Jericho, and what little courage remained drained away entirely. Then came the moment no military manual could have anticipated or explained. God gave Joshua his battle plan, and it looked nothing like a battle plan. For 6 days, the Israelites were to march around Jericho once a day, with 7 priests carrying trumpets of ram's horns before the Ark of the Covenant. The armed men would go ahead of the priests. The rear guard would follow behind the Ark. Not a single word was to be spoken by the people. Not a shout, not a war cry, not a word of command. Just marching, just silence, just obedience. And so they marched. Day 1, once around the city, then back to camp. Day 2, once around, then silence. Day 3, Day 4, Day 5, Day 6. The people of Jericho watched from their walls each morning as an entire nation circled their city in complete silence. No attack, no siege engines, no catapults or battering rams, just people walking, just trumpets sounding, just a strange, patient, unexplainable obedience. Some of the Canaanites must have laughed, others must have trembled. None of them could explain what they were seeing. On the 7th day, everything changed. They rose before dawn, and this time they marched around the city not once, but 7 times. 7 laps around Jericho, the priests blowing their trumpets, the people walking in silence. 7 times. And on the 7th lap, as the trumpets gave one long, sustained blast, Joshua turned to the people and called out, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city!" And the people shouted. A sound rose up from Israel, unlike anything Jericho had ever heard. It was not the battle cry of soldiers. It was the shout of a people who had already been told they won. A shout of faith before the evidence arrived. And the walls of Jericho, the great unconquerable walls that had stood for generations, the walls built to withstand armies and centuries, came crashing down. Every soldier rushed straight in, each man going directly forward, not climbing rubble, not fighting through a breach. Straight in, because the walls had fallen flat before them. The city was taken. The battle was over before it had fully begun. But Joshua had not forgotten. He turned to the 2 men who had gone as spies into the land. "Go into the house of the woman who hid you. Bring her out, and bring out all who are with her, exactly as you swore to her." The young men who had been spies went quickly to the house they knew, the window with the scarlet cord. They went inside and brought out Rahab, her father, her mother, her brothers, and everyone else who was with her. Every person she had gathered under that roof was brought out safely. Not one of them was harmed. The city burned around them. The walls were rubble. Jericho was consumed. But Rahab and all who belonged to her stood alive, untouched, outside the camp of Israel. Every life she had sheltered beneath that scarlet thread had been spared. Just as the promise said, she was placed outside the Israelite camp at first, as was the custom for those outside the covenant. But she was alive. Her family was alive, and her story was far from over. Because Rahab did not merely survive Jericho, she was received into Israel. She came to live among God's people, not as a captive, not as a servant, but as a member of the community. A Canaanite woman, a woman with a past, welcomed in, given a place, given a future. And then something that could only be described as the grace of God in full display. She married a man of Israel, and she became the mother of Boaz, the same Boaz who would one day show extraordinary kindness to a Moabite widow named Ruth, who would become his wife and whose great-grandson would be crowned king of Israel. His name was David, and from David's line, centuries later, would come the one the whole story had always been pointing toward. Rahab, the woman of Jericho, was written into the genealogy of Jesus, mentioned by name in the first chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, in the lineage of the Messiah, alongside Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. A Canaanite woman, a woman the world had written off, in the most sacred family tree in all of human history. In the book of Hebrews, the great roll call of faith lists the heroes who acted on God's promises before they saw the outcome. Abraham, Moses, Noah, Gideon, David, and Rahab, named among them as an equal. By faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. Her faith was real, and it was counted. In the book of James, she is placed beside Abraham as an example of faith that produces action, not a faith that only speaks, a faith that moves. A faith that hides spies under flax and ties a cord in a window and gathers every person she loves into the space of a promise. The scarlet cord she hung in that window has echoed through the ages, a small, ordinary thread of red hanging in the dark over a city under judgment, and everyone gathered beneath its promise was saved. Theologians have seen in it a picture of the blood of Christ, ordinary in appearance, unexpected in its power. The thing that separates those who are saved from those who are not. Rahab's story calls out across the centuries and says something deeply important about the nature of God. He does not choose the way we expect. He does not require a perfect past. He is not looking for a spotless record or an impressive pedigree. He is looking for the heart that dares to believe and the hands willing to act on that belief before all the evidence is in. Rahab heard stories about a God she had never met, stories about water splitting and armies drowning and manna falling from the sky, and she decided those stories were true. Before she saw the walls fall, before she saw the army march, before she had any proof she would live through what was coming, she chose faith. And she hung that cord in her window as an act of declaration. I am trusting in this. Whatever happens, I am on the side of this God. Perhaps you are standing in your own version of Jericho right now. Perhaps the walls around you feel permanent, and the gates feel locked, and the situation feels unconquerable. Perhaps your past follows you like a title you never chose, and grace feels like something given to people who started with cleaner hands. But Rahab's God is still the same God. The God who crossed a river at flood stage and brought walls down with a shout and reached into a condemned city to pull one woman and everyone she loved out of the rubble. He did not require her to be perfect before he included her. He required her to believe, and in believing, she became part of a story far greater than anything she could have written for herself. The God who saves cities does not hesitate to save a single soul.